Contemporary needs. It's important here to turn for a moment to the notion of obsolescence, for the fear of product obsolescence drives businessmen to innovation at the same time that it impels the consumer towards rented, disposable, or temporary products. The very idea of obsolescence is disturbing to people bred on the idea of permanence, and it is particularly upsetting when thought to be planned. Planned obsolescence has been the target of so much recent social criticism that the unwary reader might be led to regard it as the primary or even exclusive cause of the trend towards shorter relational duration. There is no doubt that some businessmen conspire to shorten the useful life of their products in order to guarantee replacement sales. There is similarly no doubt that many of the annual model changes with which American and other consumers are increasingly familiar are not technologically substantive. Detroit's autos today deliver no more mileage per gallon of gasoline than they did 10 model changes back, and the oil companies, for all the additives about which they boast, still put a turtle, not a tiger, in the tank. Moreover, it is incontestable that Madison Avenue frequently exaggerates the importance of new features and encourages consumers to dispose of partially worn-out goods to make way for the new. It is therefore true that the consumer is sometimes caught in a carefully engineered trap. An old product whose death has been deliberately hastened by its manufacturer and the simultaneous appearance of a new, improved model advertised as the latest heaven-sent triumph of advanced technology. Nevertheless, these reasons by themselves cannot begin to account for the fantastic rate of turnover of the product in our lives. Rapid obsolescence is an integral part of the entire accelerative process, a process involving not merely the lifespan of spark plugs, but of whole societies. Bound up with the rise of science and the speed up in the acquisition of knowledge, this historic process can hardly be attributed to the evil design of a few contemporary hucksters. Clearly, obsolescence occurs with or without planning. With respect to things, obsolescence occurs under three conditions. It occurs when a product literally deteriorates to the point at which it can no longer fulfill its functions. Bearings burn out, fabrics tear, pipes rust. Assuming the same functions still need to be performed for the consumer, the failure of a product to perform these functions marks the point at which its replacement is required. This is obsolescence due to functional failure. Obsolescence also occurs when some new product arrives on the scene to perform these functions more effectively than the old product could. The new antibiotics do a more effective job of curing infection than the old. The new computers are infinitely faster and cheaper to operate than the antique models of the early 1960s. This is obsolescence due to substantive technological advance. But obsolescence also occurs when the needs of the consumer change, when the functions to be performed by the product are themselves altered. These needs are not as simply described as the critics of planned obsolescence sometimes assume. An object, whether a car or a can opener, may be evaluated along many different parameters. A car, for example, is more than a conveyance. It is an expression of the personality of the user, a symbol of status, a source of that pleasure associated with speed, a source of a wide variety of sensory stimuli, tactile, olfactory, visual, etc. The satisfaction a consumer gains from such factors may, depending upon his values, outweigh the satisfaction he might receive from increased gas consumption or pickup power. The traditional notion that each object has a single, easily definable function clashes with all that we now know about human psychology, about the role of values in decision-making, and with ordinary common sense as well. All products are multifunctional. An excellent illustration of this occurred not long ago when I watched a little boy purchase half a dozen pink erasers at a little stationery store. Curious as to why he wanted so many of them, I picked one for closer examination. "Do they erase well?" I asked the boy. "I don't know," he said, "but they sure smell good." And indeed, they did. They had been heavily perfumed by the Japanese manufacturer, perhaps to mask an unpleasant chemical odour. In short, the needs filled by products vary by purchaser and through time. In a society of scarcity, needs are relatively universal and unchanging because they are starkly related to the gut functions. As affluence rises, however, human needs become less directly linked to biological survival and more highly individuated. Moreover, in a society caught up in a complex, high speed change, the needs of the individual, which arise out of his interactions with the external environment, also change at relatively high speed. The more rapidly changing the society, the more temporary the needs. Given the general affluence of the new society, he can indulge many of these short term needs, often without even having a clear idea of what needs he wants served. The consumer has a vague feeling that he wants a change. Advertising encourages and capitalises on this feeling, but it can hardly be credited with having created it single handedly. The tendency towards shorter relational durations is thus built more deeply into the social structure than arguments over planned obsolescence or the manipulative effectiveness of Madison Avenue would suggest. The rapidity with which consumers' needs shift is reflected in the alacrity with which buyers abandon product and brand loyalty. If Assistant Attorney General Donald F. Turner, a leading critic of advertising, is correct, one of the primary purposes of advertising is to create durable preferences. If so, it is failing, for brand switching is so frequent and common that it has become, in the words of one food industry publication, one of the national advertisers' major headaches. Many brands drop out of existence. Among brands that continue to exist, there is a continual reshuffling of position. According to Henry M. Schacht, in almost no major consumer goods category is there a brand on top today which held that position 10 years ago. Thus, among 10 leading American cigarettes, only Pall Mall maintained in 1966 the same share of the market that it held in 1956. Camels plunged from 18 to 9% of the market. Lucky Strike declined even more sharply from 14 to 6%. Other brands moved up, with Salem, for example, rising from 1 to 9%. Additional fluctuations have occurred since this survey. However insignificant these shifts may be from the long-run view of the historian, this continual shuffling and reshuffling, influenced but not independently controlled by advertising, introduces into the short run everyday life of the individual a dazzling dynamism. It heightens still further the sense of speed, turmoil, and impermanence in society. The Fad Machine. Fast shifting preferences flowing out of and interacting with high-speed technological change not only lead to frequent changes in the popularity of products and brands, but also shorten the life cycle of products. Automation expert John Diebold never wearies of pointing out to businessmen that they must begin to think in terms of shorter lifespans for their goods. Smith Brothers cough drops, Calumet baking soda, and Ivory soap have become American institutions by virtue of their long reign in the marketplace. And yet I've never heard of them. That's an aside. In the days ahead, he suggests, few products will enjoy such longevity. Every consumer has had the experience of going to the supermarket or department store to replace some item only to find that he cannot locate the same brand or product. In 1966, some 7,000 new products turned up in American supermarkets. Fully 55% of all the items now sold there did not exist 10 years ago, and of the products available then, 42% have faded away altogether. Each year the process repeats itself in more extreme form. Thus, 1968 saw 9,500 new items in the consumer packaged goods field alone, with only 1 in 5 meeting its sales target. A silent but rapid attrition kills off the old, and new products sweep in like a tide. Products that used to sell for 25 years, writes economist Robert Theobald, now often count on no more than 5. In the volatile, pharmaceutical and electronic fields, the period is often as short as 6 months. As the pace of change accelerates further, corporations may create new products knowing full well that they will remain on the market for only a matter of a few weeks. Here too, the present already provides us with a foretaste of the future. It lies in an unexpected quarter. The fads now sweeping over the high technology societies is wave after wave. In the past few years alone, in the United States, Western Europe and Japan, we have witnessed the sudden rise or collapse in popularity of Bardot hairdos, the Cleopatra look, James Bond and Batman, not to speak of Tiffany lampshades, iron crosses, pop sunglasses, badges and buttons with protest slogans or pornographic jokes, posters of Allen Ginsberg or Humphrey Bogart, false eyelashes, and innumerable other gimmicks and oddities that are tuned with that rapidly changing pop culture. Interesting to see that some of those things have actually returned, but there we go. That's the cyclical nature of products and humanity for you. That was another aside. Back to the book. Backed by mass media promotion and sophisticated marketing, such fads now explode on the scene virtually overnight and vanish just as quickly. Sophisticates in the fad business prepare in advance for shorter and shorter product life cycles. Thus, there is in San Gabriel, California, a company entitled, with a kind of cornball relish, Whammo Manufacturing Company. Whammo specialises in fad products, having introduced the hula hoop in the 50s and the so-called Super Ball more recently. The latter, a high-bouncing rubber ball, quickly became so popular with adults as well as children that astonished visitors saw several of them bouncing merrily on the floor of the Pacific Coast Stock Exchange. Wall Street executives gave them away to friends, and one high broadcasting official complained that all our executives are out in the halls with their Super Balls. Whammo and other companies like it, however, are not disconcerted when sudden death overtakes their product. They anticipate it. They are specialists in the design and manufacture of temporary products. The fact that fads are generated artificially to a large extent merely underscores their significance. Even engineered fads are not new to history, but never before have they become so fleeting across the consciousness in rapid-fire profusion, and never has there been such smooth coordination between those who originate the fad, mass media eager to popularise it, and companies geared for its instantaneous exploitation. A well-oiled machinery for the creation and definition and diffusion of fads is now an entrenched part of the modern economy. Its methods will increasingly be adopted by others as they recognise the inevitability of the ever shorter product cycle. The line between fad and ordinary product will progressively blur. We are moving swiftly into the era of the temporary product, made by temporary methods to serve temporary needs. The turnover of things in our lives thus grows even more frenetic. We face a rising flood of throwaway items, impermanent architecture, mobile and modular products, rented goods and commodities designed for almost instant death. From all these directions, strong pressures converge towards the same end, the inescapable ephemeralisation of the man-thing relationship. The foreshortening of our ties with the physical environment, the stepped-up turnover of things, however, is only a small part of a much larger context. Let us therefore press ahead in our exploration of life in high transience society. End of chapter 4.